Hello chess fans and welcome to Chess 5, and today we are going to see a very interesting game between Magnus Carlsen versus Vladimir Fedoseev, and the game is from the FIDE World Cup 2021. But as we saw in our previous video that Magnus Carlsen was eliminated by Duda, but now it's a game for Magnus Carlsen between Vladimir Fedoseev for fighting for the third place. So the game is going to be very interesting. If I talk about the game between Duda versus Carlsen, because uh, both these players were going to fight for the finals. So the first game in the classical variation went into draw. So we are going to check the game between Carlsen versus Fedoseev because this game is very interesting. So let's check it out this game. So Vladimir with the white pieces and Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces. So let's see what happened in the game. The game is going to be very interesting. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Chess Fights. So Vladimir with the white pieces started with 1 d4 and Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces replied with knight f6. We have c4 by white and a g6 by Magnus Carlsen. Yeah, so perhaps we are going to see a King's Indian defense by the world champion. Game is going to be very interesting. And now we have h4 by white. So yep, usually at the place of h4 white usually plays knight c3, e4 followed by knight f3, bishop e2, bishop e3, queen d2 followed by long castle. But we have h4 by Vladimir. Yeah, the idea of h4, I think in lower level, I think anyone who is playing with the black pieces would get scared, because yeah, if you try to do long castle, if you try to do castle in this position, white can strike with h5 and it could be very dangerous for black. So let's see what happened. After h4 we have bishop g7 by Magnus, knight c3, we have d6, so solid King's Indian defense variation, e4 by white, knight to c6, knight d5, hitting the knight, we have knight t5, and now we have bishop to e2. All those who are wondering why not playing f4 in this position, attacking the knight on e5, you could play f4, but you could have played f4 if your h4 pawn would not have been on h4. If the h4 pawn would have been on h3 or h2, you can definitely play, because if you try to play f4 in this position, black is simply going to play knight g4, and now the knight on g4 is like not possible in this world to remove from the g4 square, as there is no f3 or h3 pawn that can attack the knight on g4. It's a perfect square for the knight. That's why after knight e5, f4 is not possible, so white played bishop to e2. We have h5 by black, so that there could be no h4 in the future if black tries to castle. So after h5 we have bishop to f4 by Magnus Carlsen, by Vladislav. We have castle by Magnus, knight to f3, and now we have knight into f3, capturing up the knight. And after capturing up the knight, white is having options. He can capture the knight with the bishop or with the pawn. So yep, white captured with the pawn, so that there would be some open g file ideas to attack the black king. Fine. We have c6 by black, queen to d2 by white, so that I definitely think there are two ideas. First, white can play bishop h6, remove this key bishop of black, and second, there could be some ideas of long castling, put the another rook to g1. A very dangerous idea. So after queen d2 we have captured the pawn on d5, we have c into d5, and now we have king h7 by Magnus, so that there could be no bishop h6 anymore, as the bishop on g7 and the king on h7 is covering the square on h6. So a4 by Vladimir, knight to d7 by black. So yep, now the bishop on g7 is widely open, and perhaps Magnus can remaneuver the knight from the d7 square, and there could be some deadly ideas with f5 to open up the position. So after playing knight d7 we have a5 by white, and now we have f5 by black. So after f5, if you try to capture the pawn on f5, now I can simply capture up the pawn back by playing a rook into f5, and it's an equal position. But practically speaking, I think black is having an edge, as f pawn is double, h4 pawn is pretty weak, the d5 pawn is also pretty weak, and the rook on f5 is pretty strong actually. Yep. So that's why after f5 we cannot capture. So white played rook to a3 in this position. Yeah, perhaps the idea could be so that if Magnus tries to capture, he can capture the pawn back with the pawn, and he can move the knight from the c3 square to somewhat like d1, and then he can put the a3 rook to g3 and can put some deadly attacks. Okay, so after rook a3 we have knight to e5 by Magnus, bishop to e3 by white. So I want all of you guys to think a little bit from the black side and try to find the best move for black in this position, because the move Magnus Carlsen played was simply phenomenal. So take your time and pause the video. So all those who have found the right move, congratulations on sacrificing a pawn by playing f4 in this position. You are a great expert. The reason f4 was played here, first of all, after playing bishop e3, the idea of white is to play f4 in this position, attacking the knight, and white would be having a perfect position. That's why f4 was played, and yes, sacrificing a pawn is like not a big deal for Magnus, but yeah, it's very hard to find f4 move. Yeah, obviously if white captured the pawn, white is having no other choice. And now we have first bishop d7. Now we have knight to d1 by white. And now I want all of you guys to think a bit and try to find the move which Magnus Carlsen played in this position. Okay, so all of those who have found rook into f4, congratulations. You are great at giving sacrifices. We have queen into f4. So all those who are thinking why he just sacrificed, we are going to see. But after bishop d7, if you try to even save the bishop from the f4 square by playing bishop e3, now we have rook into f3, capturing up the pawn simple. And you can't capture the rook because now coming knight into f3, and it's a check, and the queen is also hanging on d2. So that's why bishop e3 was not played, and we have knight d1, and we have a sacrifice on f4. Queen into f4, bishop h6, queen to g3, and now we have queen to f8. And after queen f8, if I talk about material, okay, I think white is having 7 pawns and black is having 6 pawns, and definitely why black is an exchange down, but engine says it's an equal position. The reason the engine says it's an equal position because black is having a large amount of activity, which we are going to see. So let's see. So after queen f8, we have knight to e3 by white, bishop to f4 by black, hitting the queen on g3. So we have queen g2. So definitely I think white is not putting the queen on g1 because white wants to put his rook to g1, attacking the pawn on g6. We have rook to c8 by black having an open file. So white blocks it by playing rook c3. We have a rook to a8. Now we have queen c8, hitting the pawn on c3. So white simply push the pawn, and now we have b5 by black. So now after playing b5, white is having option. He can capture up the b5 pawn with the c pawn or with the a pawn by doing end pass. So we have a into b6, capturing up the b5 pawn, a into b6, and now we have queen to g1 by white, which was the first blunder in this position. At the place of playing queen g1, white can play king f1 or can do short castle. If you try to do short castle, okay, black can play bishop h3, hitting the queen as well as the rook, but white can simply move the queen to h1, and after bishop into f1, king into f1, it's an equal position. Although white is a pawn plus, but it's an equal position. But at the place of castle, we have queen g1, which was a blunder, because now comes a very natural move in this position, which is queen to 8. Yeah, simply getting an open file, and queen f1 is now very deadly. White plays king f8 because king f1 because white wants to put his king to g2, which is the best square for the king right now. Now comes queen a2 by black, so that white cannot play king g2 anymore because the bishop is hanging on e2. So we have knight to g2 by white, attacking the bishop, and so that there could be some checks on b5 so that he can protect it by playing knight to e1. We have queen a1 by queen a1 check by Magnus Carlsen, which was second blunder of the game. The best move could have been to play queen to b1 check. The reason queen b1 check was the right move. Here white is forced to play knight to e1. After knight e1, here comes a fantastic move by black. b5. Very hard to find, but yeah, it's the move. If you try to capture the pawn, then we have bishop into b5. You have to capture the bishop, or you are having no more the moves. And after capturing the bishop, black is not going to capture the bishop back, but going to play a deadly move, knight into f3, capturing up the pawn. Now knight on f3 is hitting the knight on e1 as well as the queen on g1. So if you try to move the queen, there is only g2 square left, but now simply comes queen into e1 and you should checkmate. So you cannot play queen g2 at all. So the best move according to in Genesis here, king to g2. But after king g2, black can simply capture up the queen, and after rook into g1, simply capturing up the bishop, and it's completely winning position. Queen for a rook. Wow. So that's why if you don't capture up the pawn and try to move the king by playing king g2, now coming b into c for capturing up the pawn, and after capturing up the pawn, yep, just c pawn is just 3 steps away from a queen, and it's completely winning position for black. That was the reason. So b5 could have been a winning move for Magnus, but he never didn't saw it, and at the place of playing queen b1 check, he played queen a1 check. Knight e1, queen b2. Now we have knight to g2 by white, which was a blunder again. At the place of playing knight g2, white could have played knight to d3 in this position. Idea here is white is offering a knight trade, or the knight on d3 is attacking the queen on b2 as well as the bishop on f4. So the best move for black here is to capture the knight. After white captures the knight back, we have queen c3 hitting the bishop on d3. White can play bishop e2, and okay, it's an equal position totally. But at the place of knight d3, we have knight g2, which was blunder, and now black is winning. We have queen c1 check, knight e1, queen d2, queen to g2. So trying to move, double up the pieces on the g file, attacking the pawn on g6. Now we simply have king g7 by Magnus. Rook g1, king to f8. Black can move the king because the knight on e5 is already guarding the square pawn on g6. We have queen h1, e6 by black, rook to g3. So basically the idea of playing rook g3 here is, if white is saying, okay, you can capture my rook please, so that I can capture the bishop back, because currently speaking the bishop on f4 is much superior than the rook on g3. Obviously Magnus knew that, so he didn't capture the rook straight away. First we have capture on d5, we have e into d5, and now we have bishop to f5. I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to capture the rook on g3. So we have rook g1 back by white, king f7, rook g3, asking again, do you want to capture the rook? Magnus says no. So we have now rook g5. Now white is threatening to capture the bishop on f5. So now Magnus captured the rook on g5. We have h into g5, and now we have knight to e5. And after playing knight e5 on the move number 41, Vladimir Fedoseev with the white pieces resigned the game, and Magnus Carlsen with the black pieces won the game. The reason, I think many of you were thinking, why white resigned in this position. The reason, first of all, to resign in this position here is, okay, we can see that white is having 5 pawns overall, and black is having 4 pawns, and all rest of the materials are equal. So basically white is a pawn up. So why does white resign the position? Reason here is, first of all, black is threatening to capture the pawn. The second reason here is, if you talk about pieces activity, black pieces are just tremendously placed, and if I talk about white is just completely passive and having no play. So if you okay, for now the pawn is hanging on g5. So if you try to protect the pawn by playing somewhat like queen h4, trying to protect the pawn, now black is going to play queen c1, And the idea of playing queen c1 here is here black is preparing to play knight d3 and white cannot stop it. And after playing knight d3, yeah, well, the knight on d3 is attacking the knight on e1, so you have to capture the knight back. And if you try to capture the knight back, I'm going to capture with the bishop with a check. So you have to move the king from the f1 square to g2 or g1. It doesn't matter, I'm going to capture the knight on e1 on the next move, and it's winning position for black completely. So yeah, that was the reason after knight to e5 on the move number 41. Vladimir resigned because he was having no play at all. So this was the amazing game played by both the players of Magnus Carlsen and Vladimir Fedoseev. Yeah, but Magnus Carlsen just simply took over the game when he sacrificed his rook, a pawn, and we just enjoyed the game. So if you guys also enjoyed the game, then you can like to my video and tell me in the comment box that have you able to find the correct move or not. So if you are new to my channel, then you can subscribe to my channel if you like my content. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching Chess Vibes.